The crazy thing about Bitcoin is that all of the crazy things that we've said about it are coming true.
Good morning, this is Steffy and welcome to the Financial Fox, investing and innovation ideas with a twist. Bitcoin is considered not only the superior crypto assets, but also an emerging form of money. It is slowly becoming a new monetary and financial system. I know it can sound a bit complicated, but please bear with me and I will explain it all in this video. Today's episode is a deep dive into Bitcoin ecosystem and developments with Edan Yago, co-founder of Sovryn, the first project developing DeFi solution on Bitcoin. But before we go into the episode, I want to talk about our sponsors, PrimeXBT. PrimeXBT is an award-winning platform that allows you to trade global financial market using Bitcoin, Ethereum, and stablecoin, and much more. They offer traders one of the best user experience, and you can trade 50 plus assets at low fee. And the best part is that you can also follow successful traders and professional strategy managers, automatically copying their strategy and achieving the same returns. So when they execute something, your portfolio executed as well. For Financial Fox viewers, they prepare a special 50% bonus on deposit. Find more information in the description. Here is my conversation with Yago. Enjoy. Hi, Yago. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for coming on the show, where today I wanted to kind of break down Bitcoin development and, particularly what you are doing with Sovryn, with DeFi and Bitcoin. I think they're quite important for people to understand that Bitcoin is not just an asset, but is also a network. And maybe you can explain that a little bit more about the network effect of Bitcoin and how actually it is creating a new financial system.
Yeah, so I think everyone, or a lot of people today, are aware of the fact that Bitcoin is a new type of monetary asset, right? So it's a new asset which can be used to store value, to exchange value, and even to price value. And what makes it special is that it's global, it's not controlled by anyone, and so its behavior is entirely reliable as opposed to the monies that are produced by the various world banks. The big thing that I think has been missing from Bitcoin is that it has up until now only been a monetary asset, right? So you have Bitcoin, you can use it in a permissionless way, no one can stop you, you don't have to rely on any central intermediaries until you want to do something with it, right? So if you want to lend it or you want to trade it, if you want to put it to work in any way, you become reliant on central intermediaries again. And so for Bitcoin to complete its mission, what needs to happen is that we need to introduce the same level of incorruptible permissionless access to the financial layer, which we're building around the monetary layer. Because if you think about it, there's always, this pyramid of you start with a monetary base, you build liquidity and investment via finance, and that provides for a broader economy. And so if we do that, we can get to a point where Bitcoin is the basis for a productive economy globally. So what has happened over the last few years is that we started to see the emergence of what is called DeFi, or decentralized finance. And DeFi is a set of protocols and tools which provide effectively an alternative to banks or hedge funds or lending services or all of the different financial services you can think of, but you don't have to trust an intermediary. You maintain control of your keys, you maintain control of the funds. It's still permissionless, it's still global. And so it brings the assurances of what Bitcoin brought to the monetary layer to the financial layer. Up until very recently, this was mostly absent from Bitcoin. It primarily existed on other systems, most famously on Ethereum. But a group of developers, which has been growing very, very quickly, have developed a system called Sovryn, which is a extremely rich set of features in a decentralized financial protocol, which brings DeFi to Bitcoin. And so now Bitcoin is not just a monetary layer, but the Sovryn protocol extension has extended its capabilities and its assurances also into the financial space.
Okay, maybe can you explain a little bit how that works, how DeFi on Bitcoin works? You do have a side chain, how they actually work technically?
Sure. So Bitcoin was developed with its own blockchain. And that blockchain is designed to do one thing very, very well, which is to make sure that Bitcoin itself, as a monetary layer, remains completely reliable. So you know that Bitcoin is going to behave pretty much in exactly the same way it behaves today in 20 years, 40 years, 100 years. Now, other systems have looked to introduce all kinds of new features on the base blockchain layer. And broadly speaking, I think this was a mistake. I think it misunderstands how important the base layer is and how these systems should evolve. And so the approach that Bitcoin has taken is by introducing new types of complexity, not on the main chain, but on additional layers or side chains. So Sovryn, for example, is built on a side chain called Rootstock. Now, why is it it's a separate blockchain, but why is it still connected at the hip to Bitcoin? It's connected at the hip to Bitcoin in two ways. First of all, it is secured by Bitcoin proof of work, right? So the largest body of security that we have anywhere in the computing world is Bitcoin proof of work. And Rootstock piggybacks on that. Effectively, the Bitcoin miners mine main chain and Rootstock at the same time. And the second way it's connected at the hip to Bitcoin is that the native asset of the Rootstock chain, unlike every other chain that you can pretty much think about, which has gone and invented its own coin, Rootstock simply uses Bitcoin as the native cryptocurrency. And so when we build smart contracts and a smart contract protocol on Rootstock, we gain two primary benefits. One, we gain the benefit of the security of the Bitcoin proof of work. And the second thing is we gain the network effect of being able to use the largest, most liquid cryptocurrency in existence, which is Bitcoin.
Okay. I mean, one of the things that I would like to clarify here is that, I mean, there is an element of user experience, which usually, in order to get a better user experience, blockchain try to get more centralized. I mean, this is what is doing, for instance, Binance Smart Chain, where transactions are much faster, but is more centralized. And the same, obviously, with Ethereum and many other projects built on Ethereum. So what you are basically saying is that there is no need to find a compromise between centralization and decentralization, in order to offer a good user experience on DeFi.
Yeah, so I actually would go even a step further than that. And I think there's a very serious danger that if Bitcoin doesn't evolve to provide for these financial use cases, that users will continue to be driven to centralized exchanges or to highly compromised chains like Binance Smart Chain. And that as a result, the growth of the ecosystem around Bitcoin will itself be compromised. And we saw the same thing happen with the internet, right? The internet started out as this extremely fair, free, and transparent platform. But because of issues with scale and because of issues with accessibility and because of the way it was designed, ultimately we ended up with a few companies collecting everyone's data, gating everyone's access, and deciding what we could see and what we couldn't see. So the internet became very, very centralized in many, many ways. And we want to avoid this happening with something which is even more valuable and more systemically important than information, which is finance. And so I think it's very important that we not compromise, right? And we as users need to be aware of when we are making compromises, and be aware of the fact that we are compromising ourselves, but we're also compromising our values and compromising other people as well. But as developers and as people who are building in this industry, we need to build the tools that are going to allow people not to have to choose, to get the best of both worlds, to get Bitcoin security, to get Bitcoin decentralization, and at the same time, to have an experience where they can use decentralized, private, and transparent systems with their Bitcoin, where it feels as good or even better than using a centralized service. I mean, centralized services crash when the prices go down. Centralized services have KYC requirements, which are A, frustrating and gate your experience, but B, also steal all your data, right? And put your data at risk. And when you're using a decentralized service, when you're using just a protocol that you are directly interacting with and you don't have an intermediary, you don't have counterparty risk. You don't have the frustrations and of this of the KYC process. And you know that the system isn't going to disappear tomorrow or isn't going to crash tomorrow. So in many ways, actually, the decentralized protocols can provide, at the end of the day, much better experiences to users than the centralized services.
Okay, here comes the question about education, because there is lots of things that Bitcoin can do and a decentralized system can do to empower people, but there is this big hurdle of technical knowledge that it is a challenge. What's your answer? How this can be solved for mainstream adoption?
Well, partly it's the fact that I'm having a conversation with you now, right? And that it's up to all of us to sort of educate people and do what we can, and people are curious. But at the end of the day, it's really about what I was saying earlier, giving the absolute best experience and making it as simple and easy to use as possible. So for example, recently with Sovryn, a Transact integrated with the protocol, allowing people to onboard directly onto Sovryn from fiat, right? So they could, even someone who is totally new to Bitcoin could experience the experience of acquiring Bitcoin from a decentralized platform on a decentralized platform, having control of their keys from the very, very beginning, and having the ability to lend that out or to trade that without going through an intermediary. And I think that's super exciting, right? So now everyone, when their friend asks them, what's the best place to get Bitcoin, they don't need to send them to Coinbase anymore. They can send them basically to the Bitcoin ecosystem itself. So to me, that is, it's developments like that, right? Making it really intuitive and easy to use, that is the most important thing we can be doing at this stage in the evolution of the industry.
Okay, you had a few, let's say, couple of weeks very busy with Sovryn. The token has been listed also on Uniswap, but many things has happened actually in the last few weeks. Do you maybe want to summarize what has gone live and the new feature as well?
Well, it's kind of crazy how much progress has been made with Sovryn, and it's really due to the high degree of enthusiasm coming from a large number of developers working around the world and around the clock. I mean, just in the last few weeks, Sovryn has introduced bridges to other chains, introduced margin trading, introduced the ability to start lending and borrowing new kinds of assets. And generally speaking, we've just been seeing a huge amount of new features and improvements to existing features occurring on the protocol level and also on the front end and interface level. There's an entirely new interface which has been released on Sovryn.app, which is the most popular way that people can interact with Sovryn, but certainly not the only way. And so there's really a big community of people working on this project now, and at a pace that I think is maybe not matched by any other project in the space. At this point in time already, despite being quite young, Sovryn is probably already the most feature-rich and extensive DeFi protocol anywhere in the world. And this is before it has, sort of gone out into the world and gotten a token listed and it is traded on all kinds of exchanges. And so really where the activity is happening, where the action is happening, is on the Sovryn protocol itself.
So can you explain when I'm going to the platform, right? You mentioned by borrowing and lending. What else I can do as let's say that I have some cryptocurrency. I come to Sovryn. What should I do? How I connect with the platform?
Well, it really depends what you're trying to accomplish, right? So some people want to be able to get liquidity on Bitcoin so they can pay rent or they can buy things without having to sell their Bitcoin, in which case you can borrow dollars using Bitcoin as collateral. Other people want to trade Bitcoin so they can trade Bitcoin against Ethereum or BNB or dollars. Some people want to take even more risky strategies and margin trade. Some people would like to double up on their Bitcoin, and so they can go long on Bitcoin using Bitcoin as their collateral, even if they don't have more dollars with which they can buy Bitcoin. And some people want to earn yield on their Bitcoin. So, they want to lend out their Bitcoin and earn more money. Or they want to act as a liquidity provider in one of the many trading pools that exist on Sovryn. And so right now, some people are earning 200 or 300% sort of yearly returns on Sovryn just by acting as liquidity providers, in part because the protocol is very, very young.
And also there is a token as well. Can you maybe expand a little bit about the function of the native token?
Yes, so Sovryn is controlled by its community, and the way the community expresses its desires is through a token called the SOV token. The SOV token is used in a number of ways in the protocol, but the two most important ways in which it's used is it's used by users who want to stake that token and therefore can vote for changes that may happen to the protocol. And then in doing so, they also earn fees from the protocol. In other words, you get paid for watching out for the protocol and thinking about the protocol long-term and participating in governance. I think one key thing is that, up until now, what we've seen is lots of chains created with all kinds of specific features, and every single one of those chains had its own cryptocurrency, right? It was its own native currency. Sovryn and the SOV token are entirely different. You actually never need to even know about SOV in order to use the Sovryn protocol. The only thing you ever need to have is an asset like Bitcoin, or specifically Bitcoin, to pay the gas fees. So Sovryn is much more like a token that is only used by those who really want to be part of the community and really want to earn the fees from the protocol, but has nothing to do with being an ordinary user. And so SOV is not a cryptocurrency at all.
Okay, talking about gas fee, they work the same way that Ethereum gas fee work, or they are going to be a better way or better gas fee, let's call it that way?
Well, I mean, the gas fees on Sovryn are already much lower, about 50 times lower than on Ethereum.
Wow.
And we expect that they're going to drop substantially from there. So there's quite a lot of work being done on introducing scaling technology in the form of roll-ups, which would allow the fees to drop perhaps another 50x from where they are right now. And so it's quite possible that in a few months, it will be possible to have an experience using Sovryn, which is almost identical and in many ways better to what you would experience on a centralized exchange. It will be almost instantaneous transaction. And there may actually be no fee for the transactions except for the trading fee itself, which will cover the gas fee, which will be so small. So I think the goal with Sovryn in the first stage is to bring the ability for Bitcoiners to be sovereign in the way that they use Bitcoin. In the second stage, it is to compete with the centralized exchanges and centralized lending platforms. And in the third phase, it's basically to compete with the banks and the hedge funds and to provide an alternate financial system, which is completely transparent and global. If Sovryn achieves its goal and Bitcoin achieves its goal, in the future, 15 years from now, we will look at a world where Bitcoin is the currency that everyone uses and Sovryn is the way that everyone puts that Bitcoin to work.
So are we moving towards a Bitcoin standard?
I think that of all the assets that exist in the world right now, And that includes the dollar, the yuan, Ethereum, gold, petroleum, anything you can think of. Bitcoin has the highest chance of being the reserve currency of the world 15 years from now. And, I remember sitting 12 years ago on panels and talking about how Bitcoin was going to be the reserve currency of the world. Sorry, not 12 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. We're going to be the reserve currency of the world. And it sounded so crazy that even I and the people who sat with me on the panel and agreed with me thought maybe we had lost our minds, right? Maybe we had become flat earthers. But here we are 10 years later. And the first nation state has just decided to turn Bitcoin into legal tender. The crazy thing about Bitcoin is that all of the crazy things that we've said about it are coming true. So yes, I think that this is the most likely outcome of all the various outcomes that we can have. And what's nice about that is it's also the best possible outcome.
Yeah. Can you expand a little bit on the network effect? That in one of the interview that you did in the past, you specify how the network effect is in Bitcoin and is not in the ecosystem. And how is different from what people say is the Ethereum network effect?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, let's look at the Ethereum network effect, right? So Ethereum for a long time has said it's got this very, very powerful network effect of developers and users. And then gas fees got high. And what did we see immediately? We saw the emergence of, Solana and BSC and Polygon. Today, just BSC and Polygon, each of them has larger transaction value than Ethereum alone. And together, they have 11 times more transaction flow than Ethereum. Yeah. This is not a strong network effect. And there's an additional problem that we're seeing, which is that as layer 2 technologies are introduced and other EVM compatible chains are introduced, people are migrating and the dApps are migrating to all of these different platforms. And so the one really important network effect that I think Ethereum had, which was this composability between the dApps, is breaking now as that ecosystem fragments. And so more and more we're entering into a world where wallets and dApps and bridges all provide the user a way to seamlessly, without even understanding what they're doing, interact with a very, very large number of different chains with different assumptions. In such a world, Ethereum, to my mind, still has an important place. And certainly I would never take away from what Ethereum has accomplished. But I don't think it has the network effects that people sometimes ascribe to it. And I think as a result, it will not become what people are expecting, which is effectively the single layer to control everything.
Okay, so what are you expecting from Bitcoin going forward? We have just seen the Taproot upgrade, which was very important in terms of scalability of the network as well. What do you think are the next steps Bitcoin should accomplish in order to get to the Bitcoin standard, or to get to the mainstream use?
Right. So I think Bitcoin had a very dramatic civil war, a traumatic civil war, just 2 or 3 years ago, right? And that caused a great deal of defensiveness or PTSD in the community, and also meant that changes became to be viewed as much more suspicion. With Taproot, I think we're now past that. I think the trauma of the block size war is over, and now we're going to be re-entering a new Bitcoin renaissance of people becoming more open again and starting to move with greater interest to introducing changes to Bitcoin. I think there's something of a risk there. We really want to keep Bitcoin main chain sacred. Basically a law of nature, the same thing block after block after block for generations. And so to my mind, there's maybe one change that we want to introduce into Bitcoin, which is the only change we need to introduce into Bitcoin and would provide us with the best of both worlds. On the one hand, it would protect the ability to keep main chain in exactly the way it is. And on the other hand, it would make it possible to do permissionless innovation on Bitcoin and for anyone to try any experiment on Bitcoin at all. And I think this is to have trustless pegs between Bitcoin and sidechains of Bitcoin and rollups. The most advanced proposal we have right now for that is something called BIP 300, which is also known as the drive chain. The drive chain is a way for allowing Bitcoin miners to secure any number of sidechains and for anyone to spin up a sidechain without impacting the security or the nodes of main chain level 1. And so that is BIP 300. And I think that if there's one thing that we should be looking to introduce into Bitcoin, and maybe becomes the last thing we ever need to introduce into Bitcoin, it's BIP 300.
Okay, that seems is great, and it's definitely a very interesting space to watch. So where people can go and find yourself and also try Sovryn as well. So
Sovryn, most people start out using Sovryn on sovryn.app, sovryn.app, which is a website that I had a few others built for Sovryn. And I think has an application where you can try it out. And then you can also follow Sovryn on Telegram or on Twitter. In Twitter, it's at Sovryn, Sovryn BTC, so Sovryn Bitcoin, which is the way you want your Bitcoin to be. And I'm Edan Yago, EDANYAGO, and I would be very happy if you followed me too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Yago, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, this was a great conversation with Yago, and I hope we answer the main question and information you needed on Bitcoin developments and DeFi. Go and check out Sovryn app. And if you have any question, don't hesitate to get in touch and send me a message or an email. I will see you next time.